Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on the new enhanced reporting requirements coming into effect from the 1st of January. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter for this webinar, and we are joined by a team of experts in the background in the form of Alan, Cormac, Jade and Ollie, who are all standing by waiting for your questions. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar. So we're going to start with a brief introduction, providing an overview of enhanced reporting requirements legislation. So we'll outline the categories of expenses and benefits that you need to report and the various methods of doing that. We're then going to focus on processing ERR in Sage Payroll. So we're going to talk about setting up expenses payments, which will include employees in an ERR submission. And then we're going to take you through the submission process, which will involve categorizing the expenses and then submitting the information directly to revenue. We'll briefly cover corrections to submissions, and we've got some answers to a couple of common questions, although I'm sure you'll have many of your own questions, and that's why we're running the Q&A throughout today's webinar. So all of that should take up to around 45 minutes, and as I say, we'll try and stick around at the end to give you further time to look through those questions. So let's get straight on with the introduction. Enhanced reporting requirements is new legislation coming in from the 1st of January 2024, and it requires employers to submit details of certain tax-free expenses and benefits that are made to employees or directors directly to revenue on or before the date of payment. So it's real-time reporting for these tax-free expenses and benefits. Now, this does only apply to expenses that have been incurred by employees and then reimbursed by their employer. So the employee has paid for it out of their own pocket, and they are being paid back by their employer. What this means is it doesn't include expenses that have been bought using company credit cards, or where a payment has been made directly to a supplier by the employer. It is purely expenses incurred by employees or small benefits being given to them and reimbursed by their employer. And you can read more about the legislation on the revenue site, revenue.ie/ERR. So let's take a look at the specific categories that you need to report under enhanced reporting requirements. So there are three categories, the first of which is travel and subsistence. Now, for travel and subsistence expenses, you need to report the date of payment and amount paid for each of the following subcategories. So travel vouched, travel unvouched, subsistence vouched, subsistence unvouched, site-based employees, and that category includes country money, emergency travel, and eating on site. So as part of the submission, you need to say what category that falls under, and that will be something that we show you in the demo, how to assign that, and the amount paid. The next one is small benefit exemption. So this is usually in the form of a gift card or a small gift to your employee. And this can be provided tax-free as a maximum of 2 benefits per tax year, not exceeding a combined total of €1,000. So a common time that you would provide a small benefit exemption would be a gift card at Christmas. So if you're giving them out for this Christmas in 2023, that does not need to be reported because it's not been paid after the 1st of January. But that's something to consider maybe next Christmas, that you will need to report the amount of that small benefit as part of your ERR submission. And then the third category that needs to be reported is remote working daily allowance. And for that category, you need to tell them the number of days, the amount paid, and date of payment. So this allowance provides up to €3.20 per day, tax-free, for employees that are remote working. Now, again, if you're unsure if an expense falls under these categories, you do need to seek clarification from Revenue, and there's some great information available on their website that we've linked to on the slide. So how do you report all of this information in real time? Well, essentially, there are 3 options. The first one, and the one that we're going to focus on in the webinar today, is to submit using Sage Payroll. And once you've installed your payroll year-end update, which includes Sage Payroll 2024 for the new tax year, that will include the enhanced reporting functionality. The second option is you may be able to report using third-party expenses software. So if you have an expenses system that you use to deal with paying out expenses, that might have the ability to either submit the ERR directly to revenue or even to export a file that you can then upload to the ROS portal. And the third option is using the ROS portal, you can manually submit expenses, or as mentioned, you can import a file in the correct format. So 3 different ways that you can report, and that leads me nicely to a poll question that we have for you, just to understand a little bit more about your background and how you currently deal with expenses. So if you take a look on your screen, I've just launched a poll, and the question for you this morning is, how do you currently process your employees' expenses? So we've given you 4 options, and if you can choose the one that is the closest fit for you. So do you pay the expenses through payroll as part of a normal pay run? So using a tax-free payment. Do you have an expenses system where it's not recorded in payroll? Or do you pay them out on an ad hoc basis? And by that, I mean they're paid out as and when the expense claims are received. And we've got an other option if none of those first 3 apply, or if you don't currently pay expenses. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds just so that we get a decent number of votes in. I can see we've had 63% have voted so far, and it's quite close between 2 of the options there on the poll. And I am going to share the overall results with you, just out of interest. So I think there, with nearly 80% of the vote in, we're going to close that poll down. Thank you very much. And if I just share the results with you, this is quite interesting. So the most common answer today is 42% of you currently paying expenses on an ad hoc basis. So you're paying out to employees when you receive that request. 37% of you are paying them through payroll as part of a normal pay run. So you are pretty much set up to be submitting via Sage Payroll if you do it that way. 17% of you are using an expenses system and not currently recording them in payroll. And we have 4% with the other option. So what I would say is, if you are paying out on an ad hoc basis, you're going to need to have a think about how you're going to report these expenses. So you might do it using the ROS portal, or you might think about changing your process so that you're including expenses in payroll. And we're going to explain how that all works for the rest of this webinar. So let's just bring that poll off screen for you, and I'll just make sure that I am sharing my screen. And we're now going to move on, and we're going to talk about processing expenses within your Sage Payroll software. Now, first thing I want to make clear is there's a few requirements to be able to submit your ERR using Sage Payroll. So in order to do this, number 1, you must pay your employees' expenses and benefits through payroll on your usual pay date. So we're going to show you how to create expenses payment types, and then that will be included in your employees' net pay, but it wouldn't be subject to tax, USC, or PRSI. You need to have processed at least 1 expenses payment type in Sage Payroll, as that will flag the employee to be included in the submission. And you're going to need to provide the relevant information for each category of expense or benefit that you're reporting. So which of the travel and subsistence categories it falls into, for example, or the number of days in relation to remote working daily allowance. And you're going to see how the categorization works a little bit later on in the demo. So if you're doing all of this, you'll be able to process expenses through payroll. And in order to do this, you will need to create at least 1 expenses payment. Now, you could have just a single payment that covers all expenses that you're reporting, because you'll be doing your categorization when you do the submission. Or you might find it more convenient to have separate expenses payments to assist you with the categorization. And another pay element that you'll need if you're dealing with small benefits is a net deduction. Now, the reason for that is a small benefit is a non-cash payment. So typically it's a gift card, maybe a one-for-all card that you give to your employee, but you need to account for it through your payroll by processing the value as an expense. But you then also need to deduct the same amount as a deduction so that they're not being paid that small benefit amount. They've received it already as part of a gift card or whatever it is you've given them. And then once you've got these pay elements set up, you would process the expense or benefit in the employee's time and pay screen alongside their usual payments. So let's now take a look in the demo at how this will work. So first thing I'll just point out is that I'm logged into Sage Payroll 2024, it's version 27, and it's budget 2024 compliant. And we're going to go to our payment settings. So to find this, you would go to company/payroll at the top of the screen, and then you would select the payments option. Now you'll see a list of my current payments, and because I do pay my expenses through payroll, I've got a couple of payments that I'm already using for travel expenses and remote work, but they are currently set up as variable payments, and I need to change that to an expense payment so that the employees with these payments can be included in the submission. So if I edit my travel expenses, so currently it is variable and I've cleared the box for tax, USC, and I'm not applying PRSI. And all I need to do is just change that type to expenses. And you can see it's applied the same settings, which cannot be changed. And then I would go ahead and save that change. I'll do exactly the same for my remote working daily allowance payment. So I'm going to set that to expenses. And because I have a small benefit that I need to submit, I'm going to create a separate payment for that. So I'm going to click onto new. I will enter a description. So I'm just calling this small benefit EX exemption. And again, because it's reportable, I've chosen the expenses category. Now, as I say, you don't have to split it like this. You could have a single payment. You could have even more payments if you wanted to split it on the timesheet itself, but you will still need to categorize as part of the submission. That's the point I'm trying to get across. So those are my payments dealt with, and because we do have a small benefit, if I go into company payroll and then deductions, I'm going to create a small benefit deduction as a new deduction. It needs to be net, after tax, PRSI and USC, and a standard deduction. You could apply any other settings, and then I would click save. And that way we can account for the small benefit, but we're not actually paying it through the payroll. So those are my payments set up, and I've already set period 1 and retrieved my latest RPNs. So let's imagine I need to process some expenses and benefits in period 1, and I'm ready to enter the time and pay information. So I'm going to click on enter time and pay. I'm just going to use the sequential mode for this one. And I'm just going to enter some information for the first few employees. So I have an employee who I'm paying €100 in travel expenses. So I've entered that using my travel expenses payment. I've got one who does 5 days of remote work a week, and I pay them the allowance, so €16 in total. And my third employee has some travel expenses, but I'm also going to put through a small benefit. So maybe I've given them a gift card. They weren't in over Christmas, so I've done this in 2024, so it needs to be reported. So it was €500. And because it's a notional payment, I'm going to put the same amount as the deduction. So it's accounted for, but it's not actually paid in the employee's net pay. And for the rest of my employees, I'm not going to put through any expenses type payments. So they will be excluded from the ERR submission. So that's the time and pay calculated. We can then run our reports in the usual way. So for example, the control summary will give me totals for non-taxable payments, which would include these expenses. And it also gives you a breakdown by the payment type. So this information might be useful if you're doing any reconciling. And once you've got your reports, you would run end of period in the usual way. And you would send your payroll submission, which reports the taxable payments and deductions, again, in the usual way. Now, that one doesn't include any of the expenses or benefits, because that's going to be done separately as an enhanced reporting submission. So those are my expenses processed for period 1. And we are now ready to start thinking about submitting these to revenue. So that's what I'm going to cover next, ERR submissions. And the first step in the submission is going to be to categorize the expenses. Now, this is what the first screen will look like, and it will display any employee that had an expense payment type processed in the current period. So in my case, it was the 3 employees. It's then going to show information about the total expenses paid. So we've got a total figure with a little information icon, which will give you a breakdown by payment type. Before you've categorized anything, you'll see the full amount in the column that says total expenses excluded from enhanced reporting. And the idea is you type the categorized amounts in to the expense category section, and that will reduce the amounts that are excluded, and it will increase the amounts related to enhanced reporting. And I'd recommend that you only use the expense payment type for items you're going to submit. And that way you'll be looking for that third column, expenses excluded, to read 0, and expenses related to enhanced reporting should be the full amount. Now, once you've done that and you've saved your progress, you move on to the next step, which is to log on to revenue with your ROS cert. You'll be able to review the details, and we will display any validation warnings. If, for example, you've gone over any limits for things like small benefit, and then you'll be able to submit direct to revenue. So that's how it works. Let's see it in action. So I've got a bit of a demo on this one. So a few places you can send it from. On the main process map, you've got the option to send enhanced reporting submission. It's also available from the pay run tasks and the direct payroll reporting tasks. And another place you'll find it is from the menu bar at the top of the screen, direct payroll reporting, enhanced reporting, and then send enhanced reporting submission. So I'll click onto that now, and you'll see the screen that you saw on the slide. So it's showing the 3 employees that had an expense payment. If I want to see a breakdown by payment type, so for this third employee, I can see 150 was travel expenses, 500 was the small benefit. And the idea here is that you would categorize this amount into the relevant columns. Now, for my first employee, the €100 was all travel vouched. So difference between vouched and unvouched is vouched is where there's a receipt, and unvouched is where you're paying a flat rate for the expense. So that's allocated the €100 for our first employee. Second one, this was remote daily working allowance, which is over towards the right-hand side. So for this one, we need to specify number of days, which was 5 for this week, and 16 was the amount. And then for the third one, we had a small benefit, €500, and the travel expenses is actually a combination of travel vouched and subsistence vouched. So we've split it like so. So you can see here that all of the amounts are now allocated. If you've got a lot of these to enter and you need to save your progress, you can click save at any point. And then if you were to cancel out, you could come back and pick up where you left off. But because I have now categorized all my expenses, I'm going to click onto next. It's asking me for my certificate details. And I'm going to need to find the password because for some reason I've cleared that out. So just give me one moment. There we go. We'll pop that in and we'll make sure that's saved. I think I've managed to untick that box. And once you've confirmed your certificate details, it'll then do some validation behind the scenes. So it's checking against some parameters. For example, with small benefits, we know there's a €1,000 limit per year. So it'll be looking to see whether you've categorized anything more than that amount. And then once it's done the validation, it's going to display a summary of the submission, given the total values for each category and the total number of employees included. So that has now come up on screen. So we can check and make sure that we're happy with this information and it's what we're expecting. And if we are, you simply click submit, and then you'll see another progress bar, and that will then submit the ERR to revenue. So that is completed. And there's a note here that you can see a detailed breakdown within your submission log. So if I click onto finish, go to direct payroll reporting, enhanced reporting, and view enhanced reporting submission log, you'll see that this is a submission I've just made. And if you click export details, it will output a report with a summary and then a page for each employee, so you can see exactly how everything was categorized. So that report can be saved as a PDF or printed out, can be accessed at any time from the submission log. And if you wanted to do any further reporting on ERR values, those fields are available in both the standard report writer and the advanced report writer as well. So that is your submission. It's only required where there are expenses processed. So you don't need to do a nil return for periods where you haven't paid any expenses or benefits. And it submits the payroll pay date as the date of the expense payment, which is why you need to put your expenses through the payroll and pay them on your employee's usual pay date. So that's doing a submission. Let's have a quick look at ERR corrections. So in the current version of Sage Payroll 2024, it is possible to submit a correction for the current period. So the period you're currently in, if you realize there has been a mistake with the categorization, you will be able to run the submission again, and it will send an amendment submission to revenue. Or if there's an employee missing because you forgot to put the expense payment through, you can rewind end of period. You can then enter the expense value in time and pay and run end of period again. And then you can go back into the submission and you can enter all the corrected values for the relevant expenses category. But what I would say is if you have rewound end of period, you will need to do all of the categorization again once you've ran end of period after doing the correction. So if it's only the categories that were wrong, you can just go back into the submission. If there's someone missing, you will need to rewind or restore back. But the good news is we're working on improvements to this functionality. So similar to payroll submissions, it will be possible in the future to resend a submission for a historical period. So do make sure that you install any updates that become available early in next year. So quick look at how this works. And for ease, I'm just going to make a correction to the categorization. So I'm still in period 1, as it shows here at the bottom of the screen. I've realized that I've miscategorized some of those expenses. So I'm going to go back in to send enhanced reporting submission. Program knows that you've already sent one. So do we want to send an amendment? We're going to click yes. And you can see that it has saved what was previously categorized. So I've realized for employee 1, it wasn't a vouched travel, it was actually unvouched. It was a flat rate that we've paid them. So I'm just going to move that figure to a different category. And we'll do a few amendments on this one as well. Let's change this perhaps to 75 and 75. And then we can save those changes. So you can then work through the submission again, and it'll do that same validation. We'll just take a few moments in my demo. And it'll display a summary of the corrected submission values. So this is my corrected submission for period 1, And you can see there, it now reflects the new categorization that I've just entered. So again, that would be submitted. That is sent to revenue, and that will replace the previous submission log. So this now shows the details of the latest submission. So it might be an idea if you do a correction to perhaps save the original log first, so you can see what went through originally, but this will always show the latest details. So you can actually read more on ERR corrections following the link on the handout. And as I say, in the future, there will be an option to resend submissions for historical periods. So we're going to finish the demo by highlighting a couple of common questions that we've received so far on enhanced reporting requirements. And the first one might be relevant to you if you have a lot of employees with expenses or benefits, or perhaps you run a payroll bureau and you've got lots of clients that might be dealing with this. And the question is, can I import the categorized expenses instead of having to manually enter them into that grid? And the answer is yes, you can. You can import ERR values using a CSV template. There is more information on the link here. So I'm just going to click on that to show you the article with all the guidance. So this guide has a download containing 2 files, which are used for the import. And then you have step-by-step instructions of how to create an import file, and then how to import that into the program. So I'm not going to read through this with you, but what I will do is I'll give you a quick demo on how this works. So what I've already done is I've downloaded those files and I've saved them into my default data location. So they're actually here: import categorise expenses, IMP is the import file, and the CSV file contains the data that we're going to import. Now, if I just open the IMP file in Notepad, you'll see that it contains a data path. So this file needs to point at the location of your CSV file, which will contain the data that you're importing. So I've just gone with the default settings. So this is where I've saved the CSV file. But if you're keeping your import file somewhere else, maybe you've got different import files for different clients, you can amend the data path for the import in this IMP file. Next up, we create the CSV file. So we start you off with a blank one. If I open this in Excel, you can see it is literally a blank file. Column A is where you enter the employee's code, and often this will have leading zeros. So a top tip is to format column A as text so that it retains the leading zeros. So I'm just going to import expenses for 3 of my employees. Column B is the period number, so we're going to do this for period 2. And C is the type of pay run, which is almost always N for normal. And then columns D through to M reflects the columns that you see in that grid. So you'll see the key on the article. It tells you exactly what you put into each column, but I know that column E is travel vouched. So just for this demo, I'm going to put €100 of travel vouched through, and then in columns L and M, I'm going to put 4 days of remote daily allowance at €12.80. So this is a very simple import file. You then need to save it as a CSV. So make sure you do a save as, and you set the format just here to comma delimited, star.csv. So I'm saving that file, which means I will now be able to import that information. So I'll just bring the slides down a second while I demo this. So I'm just going to set my next period, because we're going to import values for period 2. I'll skip the RPNs, and we'll just quickly run through, and we will enter some expense values. So you still need to enter at least 1 expense payment for the employee to appear in the grid. So I'm just doing it for these first 3. We would run end of period, and send the payroll submission in the usual way. And we can import the details for the enhanced report and submission. You can actually import this at any point. You might want to import it before you run end of period. And that way, if you do need to rewind the period to make a mistake, the ERR values will already be imported. But whenever you choose to do it, you'd go to the miscellaneous menu at the top and down to data import. Choose the data import option and then find your import categorise expenses file. So it's this one just here. That will then read the data from the CSV file and import those values. And if that's all worked, which I'm hoping it has, when I go into the submission, we can see the categorised expenses. So they are all now related to enhanced reporting. We had €100 travel vouched. We've got our remote working days and amount paid. So that could be a bit of a time saver. It helps if you're familiar with importing information. As I say, we have got that full guide. So we can click onto next. It'll then validate the submission data as it did before. And then you can go ahead and complete that submission. So that would be importing the categorized information on the grid. And just to sort of give you a bit of an illustration about the format of that CSV file, the first three columns relate to the employee and the pay period, and then D to M mirrors the columns that you see in the categorized expenses grid. So hopefully that information on the handout might be helpful if you're planning to do this. One other common question that I just want to mention at this point is, can I use Sage Payroll to send ERR submissions if I don't process expenses through payroll? And the simple answer to that is no. You must process an expense payment in payroll in order to include the employee in the submission. So for their name to come up in the grid, they need to have an expense payment. And expenses must also be paid on your payroll pay date, as that will be the payment date that is submitted to revenue. So if you don't do that, you'll not be able to use Sage Payroll to send your ERR, but you could submit using the ROS portal, and you can find the instructions on doing that from their recorded webinar on revenue.ie/ERR, or you could mix and match. If there are some employees where the expenses aren't paid through payroll, you could submit those ones on the ROS portal, and for those that do have expenses paid through payroll, you could submit those ones through Sage Payroll. And we have got more FAQs available in our Help Hub, so you can access that from the link below. So just a couple of the common questions. I'm sure there are many, many more, as the guys behind the scenes will attest to, but we'll be answering those in the Q&A section for the remainder of this webinar, as that has actually brought us to the end of the presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through the further support that's available whilst we get on with answering the questions behind the scenes. First port of call, if you think of something after you've left the webinar, do check out our online help centre at sage.ie/help. Follow the links for Sage Payroll /Micropay, and then look for the help topic for payroll year end 2023. That's where you'll find our ERR hub. Alternatively, you can search our knowledge base for relevant articles. And if you haven't already, you could sign up to our payroll year end webinar if you want guidance on that. Our support team's contact details are also available from that same site. So sage.ie/help. You can open that on your computer or even from your phone. And I have put together some useful links. So the link to the Help Centre hub for ERR is the first one just there. We've written a blog all around the enhanced reporting requirements legislation. So you can check that out on sage.com. And I've mentioned it a few times, but Revenue's ERR hub will be where to go if you've got questions about the legislation or how to categorize, what category a specific expense falls under. So as I say, that's about it for the presentation, but we are going to stick around. I appreciate there's a lot of you here and I'm sure there are loads of questions. We're going to do our very best to answer as many as possible. Unfortunately, we won't get round to answering them all, but look out for similar questions. I do know they sort of tick through very quickly in that area. If you want to keep any of the questions and answers, you will need to copy and paste them elsewhere. You can't download the Q&A from the webinar, unfortunately, but you can download the handout. So if you want to copy the presentation, do get them downloaded from that documents icon. If you are leaving us at this point, I just want to thank you for joining us at the webinar today, and I hope you found it insightful and useful. You'll see a survey that pops up as you leave the webinar, and I'd really appreciate any feedback that you might have on today's session, good or bad, as it does genuinely help us to improve these sessions moving forward. We will be sending you a follow-up email, which will include, fingers crossed, a copy of the recording. So a link to the recording of today's session will be included in the follow-up email. So look out for that. It'll be arriving later today, and that will come into your inbox. But for now, I'm going to go on to mute. I'm going to help the guys out with some of the questions. That'll all be done in the Q&A section on the right-hand side, and I will come back to you when we are ready to close the webinar down. So I'll speak to you soon. Hello, everyone, and thank you for sending those questions through. I can see that we have managed to answer the majority of the questions that were submitted, so I do hope that you found those answers useful. We're going to stick around a few more minutes just to get the final answers out to you, but we will be shortly closing the webinar. So it's your last chance if you want a copy of the slides to download them, which you can do so from the documents icon on the right-hand side of the screen. If there were any questions and answers that you wanted to keep, you can't download them, unfortunately. So what you will need to do is to copy and paste the question and answers that you want to keep a note of. But we will look to update our FAQs article, which is available on our support hub, which you can find on our help center. Please, if you could, take a moment to complete any survey that appears as you exit the webinar. I very much appreciate that. We always read them and act on your feedback. And do look out for a follow-up email that you'll get later today, which will include a link to the recording of today's session. And if you haven't already done so, it's still a chance to sign up for our year-end webinars if you want to know more about finishing the tax year and setting up 2024. Okay, so just looking at the questions, as I think we have provided the majority of answers, we're going to shut things down at that point. So thanks once again, everyone, for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a great festive period as well. And maybe we'll see you on one of our other webinars in the future. But from myself and the team, thanks for coming. Goodbye for now.